So what I was trying to do before, Steve, stand up, please. Steve left and he was trying to hide. But I wanted to say, have everybody give a congratulations to Steve and his wife, Rachel. They just had their first baby daughter. So congratulations. So the panel that's up here now, all three of these guys do a multitude of different things. But each of them is very successful in their own way in the investment side. We have Vinny Martin. Vinny owns and manages 10 units throughout the area. Austin owns and manages all different types of properties, from long-term rentals to Airbnb. I tell him he's the Airbnb guru. So that's a very interesting topic for a lot of people. And then Eric is like a living legend for a lot of people in the investment side around here. He owns over 60 units locally. Really a serious player. So all these guys bring a multitude of information and value to kind of everybody that's here. So they're great guys to have and pick their brains. So thank you guys for coming. Vinny, we'll start with you. You know, we talked before about how you were deployed overseas. For someone who is looking to purchase a property, I hear a lot of people who are like, my biggest fear is I don't want to get phone calls at 2 a.m. from my tenants. I don't want to have the headaches of going and maintaining and managing the property. How were you able to manage your properties while you're overseas, different time zone, you didn't even have your cell phone? How were you able to manage 10 units from, thousands of miles away?
Yeah, so the biggest thing for me is really just getting the right people in line. So before I left, I pretty much put together a roster, so to say, of some of the contractors, some of the local plumbers, electricians, people that I've developed relationships with and trusted to pretty much take phone calls in the event that something were to happen. So a lot of what I forecasted, I mean, you could almost call it is plumbing issues, electricity issue, so on and so forth. Put together a roster and really just develop those sort of relationships within the community of the right people to rely on. Because you want that person to actually answer the phone if that phone does ring, and you want that person to definitely show up in the event that they need to show up. The second thing is, some of you guys who are in the investment world already might use it. It's an app called Rent Ready. You could download it on your cell phone, operate it literally right from an app. You get to pretty much communicate with your tenants. Any issues, any sort of maintenance requests that your tenants might have, they could pay their rent through this app. You could vet your own tenants through the app. It has its own application process and everything. I think they partner with TransUnion, My Smart Move, which is another tenant application thing that people pay for, but it's free through the app. So it's something that I've utilized to put everything in one spot. Everybody pays through the app. Everything is done through one specific area, and you could even link your contractor or whoever's actually managing the property into this app so that everything goes directly to them. So
awesome. A lot of systemization.
Yeah, it was a must. And I got a great family. I can't put them, I got to put them up on a pedestal. I got a great family that goes above and beyond.
So Austin, this one's for you. Airbnb, super popular. I didn't say it before. Austin manages over $30 million in Airbnbs throughout the Hudson Valley, which is a significant number. All one guy, no team, nothing. So it's quite an impressive task. How much of, you've seen all different types of Airbnbs in all different markets. How much of it is the market and the location of the property, and how much of it is the property itself that determines the success or failure of that Airbnb?
I think the two go hand in hand, really. I mean, you really, you probably won't have a good Airbnb that's a great house in the worst location, and you won't have a dump property in a beautiful location that does very well. However, I do think a lot more comes down to the area, actually, that you're in. I've spoke on seasonality a lot, that getting as much occupancy as you can because of people going to a certain area during the different seasons of the year is extremely important. And also a draw to the area, whether it's a body of water, a ski mountain, golf courses, anything like that. Typically, any of those things are going to draw the crowds, and if you're getting a big amount of people that are traveling to the area, you have a better chance of if you don't have a Class A, AAA house that you're renting, and it's a B house, and you want to lower the rates or something like that, you'll still probably get guests. It might not be the highest performing house of all time, but typically the area will bring the people in, and then you're going to be putting them up.
Okay. No, I mean, it makes sense, right? If you look at some of the most desirable markets, there's so much overflow demand that you almost, like big weekends, I know you talk about Saratoga a lot during racing season, like basically anything I'm sure can be rented.
Yeah, I mean, the attractive areas were here long before the Airbnb market was. So it's not by coincidence that the most successful Airbnbs are in those specific areas. Saratoga is a very good, unique case. I only manage a handful up there. But of a place that has what I call an ultra peak season, where when the track is in town, I mean, summer's popular, foliage is popular, there's a lake there, there's a good shopping street, good nightlife scene, but during track season, it just outperforms what I would even call the summer and foliage peak seasons fivefold. I mean, it's just a whole nother time of year for 8 to 10 weeks where everything is booked and everything's a higher rate.
So, Eric, shifting gears for you, you've obviously scaled to a significant number of doors and units. And again, self-managing, you don't have a property management company, anything like that. I know you've been very strategic over the years with partnerships, you know, bringing partners in when it makes sense. Can you speak a little bit to, you know, how you've done that?
Yeah. So I was a teacher for about 20 years, and I shared a hallway, a classroom with some friends. One guy, I kind of schooled him, and I really, you can't change someone's integrity. This guy has the most integrity of anyone I've ever met in my whole life. He knew nothing about real estate, so we kind of had a morning meeting every single day for 6 or 8 months. He did his first flip. Next thing you know, he was kind of, hey, I'm interested in doing this and this and this. And I was like, oh, that's great. I happened to get a 15-unit building under contract. I was doing 3 flips at the same time. I had not a dollar to my name. And I was like, hey, man, you know, like, I think this would be a really stupid move for you to say no. You want to go halves with me. And we started together. We've done some wholesales, some wholesales. We did some flips together. I think we have 25 units together. Another gentleman I met, actually, I host a meetup second Wednesday of the month. And he came probably my first meeting. He kept asking me questions, and next thing you know, he starts saying, Eric, what do I do? I got this lead. I think the first one was in Beacon. And Spring Valley Road, it was falling down, literally falling down. I had to get my lawyer to write a hold harmless agreement for me to hop in the window, because when I hopped through, the floor actually gave way. So I'm like, yeah, I can wholesale this thing. She already gave back to the bank, and I said, listen, I'll put like 10 grand in your pocket. Why don't you let me either buy or sell this property to someone else, and you'll get 10 grand for something that you don't own. She said, bank will do that. I said, bank doesn't want to own this property. Call them tomorrow. Tell them that, look, I'll give you all the money that's owed in a week, 2 weeks. She called me back. She said, okay, get me that hold harmless agreement. Well, that guy and I think we split maybe $35,000 in a matter of him just calling me up and saying, hey, Eric, I got this property. Next thing you know, in the next 6 months, I think we each made 50 grand in wholesale fees. He just kept throwing me. And he threw me one on Church and Harrison Street in Poughkeepsie. He thought it was a duplex. It ended up being 2 triplexes. And I said, hey, this is a steal. You ever want to be a landlord? He's like, yeah. And next thing you know, we own that. Now we own Kingston, Newburgh together. Actually, Newburgh we sold, and Kingston we're in the process of selling. I really like to keep it local if possible. I live in Poughkeepsie. I want to be Poughkeepsie, Wappingers. I want to be able to see, touch, feel. We self-manage. We do everything ourselves pretty much. If you look at my hands, I do a lot of the repairs myself. So yeah, you know, I bring a certain value, and both my partners bring a lot of value as well. So I just partnered actually with one of my old students. He was helping me manage some of my 60 units, and I'm in contract for like 8 or 9 places right now, and I'm like dying. And I, again, have no money as always. And every time I have money, it just burns right through my pocket really, really fast. So I called up Mike. Mike helps me out, and I said, hey, Mike, you want to go halves on this? He's like, yeah, so we closed the other day. That thing's almost fully renovated. Montclair, if anyone's looking for a condo. So yeah, if someone could bring me value and I could bring them value, I try my best.
For the newer investors here, what is wholesaling and what is hoteling?
All right, so I got to the point, I know how to make things look really, really nice and sometimes close to perfect. My dad is a perfectionist, but I realized perfect doesn't pay the bills. So I make things good or good enough. And I don't do anything unsafe or anything bad, but we plow and we fly through these things. So a wholesale would be to clean up quick, 5, 10, 15 grand, put it back on the market. So you buy it under market, you put lipstick on the pig and take that pig to dinner. Wholesale, you're assigning your contract. So I would basically make it a contract assignable. I believe in being very transparent about it, what I'm doing. Some people aren't as transparent about it, but I tell the people, look, I'm going to do everything I can to buy this, but at the end of the day, what you care about is that it's sold. If for some reason I can't buy it, I'm friends with a ton of investors. I'm going to get someone that'll buy it. And 99% of the time, I don't have anyone have any problems with that, as long as I'm upfront about it. 1 or 2 times, some local lawyers hate wholesales, so they'll kind of like nix it right away. And then I kind of go back to them and say, hey, the lawyer works for you, and if you're okay with me selling it off, I'm not saying I'm gonna, but if you're okay with it, you got to tell them that, because they're going to work for you, so they're going to do what you want them to do. They're going to advise against it, but they work for you at the end of the day.
That's a great point. Austin, going back to the Airbnbs, I think there's a lot of information out there, especially now with New York City and what they've passed and everything else. What would you say are the biggest misconceptions about Airbnb, whether it's owning, whether it's buying? What are the things that people just don't get right about it?
I think pre-listing your own space, the thing that people always ask me is like the horror stories, like how many times are there holes in the walls, and do pets ruin your carpet, and what are all the bad things? I mean, naturally everybody thinks that when people are in their house every 2 days for an entire summer, or you get a big wedding group or something like that, that the place is gonna get destroyed. And I tell people all the time, I've done thousands of stays at this point between my own properties and mostly clients. And I can count on one hand how many horror stories I have. And honestly, a couple of them aren't even the result of bad guests, just unlucky timing and weather events and stuff like that. So I think that's typically the number one concern that people have before going from maybe renting something long-term to renting something on Airbnb. I think they just picture every weekend they're gonna walk in Sunday afternoon and their house is going to be trashed. And it's typically not the case.
How do you protect against that? So, because I think with the number of stays that you've had, that number is very low for the amount of horror stories. How do you ensure that that doesn't happen?
So you can go one-on-one, communicate with the guests. Airbnb allows you to turn off what's called instant booking, so people can't just have, 8 extra people and book your spot and show up with too many people and blown up air mattresses and partying on the tables and stuff like that. You can turn that off and you can actually have a conversation with the guest. What's the reason for your travel? How old is the group? What's the age range? Did you notice that we don't have a pet policy, or we have a no pet policy, just making sure you don't have any pets? You can do a little bit of due diligence prior to arrival to make sure that the rules are set out and stuff like that. Also, once people have booked, I use Airbnb's automated messages. They're called scheduled messages, to send out a house guide. And in that guide, I have every single property has very detailed and clear rules to follow, from check-in to check-out and everything in between.
No, that makes sense. So you've systematized a lot of.
Yeah, every single property, like I said, has a welcome email, and then in there a set of rules, a checkout procedure, how to follow up after the stay if anything's happened, or really I just ask everybody to be honest. If something has happened, let me know and we'll come to a solution instead of me having to chase you down, go through Airbnb. Another thing Airbnb has is air cover, which is, I'm not a licensed insurance agent by any means, but they do have an insurance policy built in. This is one of the reasons why I actually advise people to stay on Airbnb if they get a guest that's maybe for a month and they don't want to pay the fees, that you actually have a $3 million damage policy built in, a $1 or $2 million liability policy built in. Pet damages are covered. There are all these things that they include that people that maybe have one listing or haven't even been on the app before don't even know. So that's just one of the other tools that they give you to mitigate some risk.
And how much of that would you say is in the quality of the property, right? So if you have a really nice, updated, clean property and you're presenting it that way, you're attracting a certain type of, tenant that can afford that versus, something that's obviously in a worse area and so on.
So I've learned pretty quickly that just because it's an expensive property does not mean you're going to get a high quality tenant, especially if it's a high occupancy house. So you might have a place that's $2,000 a night, but if it sleeps 20 people, everybody's paying $100 a head. You might get the parties, you might get the wedding groups, you might get those family reunions that Airbnb 5 other places nearby and pack them into the house and do the barbecue at that big one. That being said, the nicer houses typically do attract a higher end guest. What I always see is the occupancy of the house itself will usually dictate how messy the house will be. I have properties that are $3 million properties on the app, they sleep 20, and then I have one that's a $2 million house that sleeps 4. And that $2 million house, they are very strict on the rules, and they are very strict on no parties, but they also understand that you're only gonna show up with 4 people. And it's like a kind of how much damage can you do? 4 people can do a lot of damage. I've seen it a couple times, but it's a much lower risk than 20.
That makes sense. Vinny, for you, with your military background, I think you have a very unique story with how you purchased your properties. Can you talk us through, you used a VA loan, then you went to a conventional loan, then you went back to a VA loan, which a lot of people don't think is even possible. Can you just kind of tell us how you did that?
Yeah, absolutely. So all my loans, how I acquired basically my 10 units is all through owner-occupied financing. So a little bit of what Gavin was talking about before. So my first property that I purchased was with a VA loan. So VA loan, no money down, no PMI, very nice. So that was my first property, and that was a 2-unit. My second property I purchased with a 5% down conventional loan. The biggest thing kind of to take away from like the initial start of this is always try to go bigger if you can with your first property. If you're just starting out, you want to acquire, I would say, the most units up front that you can with that low money down loan. So if I could have found a 4-unit property that made sense, I would have loved to have gotten that as my first property, because it's a little easier to go from 4 to 2 or 4 to 3 or 4 to 1 than it is to say, hey, you start off with a single family home and then you're trying to buy a multi-family home to the bank. So like I said, you want to go bigger first, then kind of gradually go down. So the second one was the 5% down conventional loan. The third property was a 3-unit property. However, I was able to use my VA loan again. So I believe at least 1 or 2 people told me that they were in the service or prior service. If you haven't utilized your VA loan yet, I would definitely recommend leveraging it out. Some stipulations that they have with the VA loan is that you could only use it once. What I've found out is that that's not true. There's a VA eligibility rating per county, depending on what county you're in. They have a max. So what's nice about the multifamily home is, say the single family home, for Dutchess County is $575,000 for a single family home for the VA eligibility rating. Well, if I buy a 2-family home, it's $850,000. And if I buy a 4-unit home, it's over $1 million. So it gives you basically more money per unit, right? So it's good to, again, try to leverage as many units as possible within that, so that you can get as much units acquired with the least amount of money down. And then the fourth property we ended up putting in my wife's name. So there was a loan product that was very similar to the loan product that's coming out in November, which is a 5% down Fannie Mae product, I believe. Am I saying that right? Or a Freddie Mac program that my wife was able to utilize, and that's basically how we got our fourth property. So really, the other thing I would say, because some people might say, hey, you know, the market's so competitive right now as far as putting in offers. If I put in my 5% down offer, they're going to take the seasoned investor that's putting 20 to 25% down, maybe even more. What we were able, or what I would recommend, is try to get creative with some of what you're doing when you're putting in your offer with this loan, if you're using it. So one of the things we did, this is on the last property that we purchased, was when I put in the offer, there was a broken window in the house. There was a couple things that were, you know, unkept, so to say, with the house. So how we put our offer in was, hey, you know, we realize there's a broken window. We're not going to nitpick during the inspection. We're not going to go crazy. If there's anything that comes up with the inspection, or the bank has an issue with anything, we will come in and we will fix it basically before, so that the bank doesn't have an issue with it. So when you lead with an offer with that, it makes a seller a lot more comfortable with, oh, okay, like these people are pretty serious, you know, although they're not putting as much money down, you know, a couple of these things might come up, and hey, we actually don't want to deal with it. These guys will take care of it. So when you come in with that approach, although, hey, the financing might not be as sexy, so to say, to the seller, you could always get creative with that one. I think so. Another deal that me and Jake did and we dealt with was with the VA. It's always like, oh, there's peeling paint, or there's something wrong with the house. I went over there on a Saturday. I mean, this is what it took to close the deal, but I covered the whole porch with plywood and painted it so that we could get the house appraised and closed. But these are the sort of things that you got to do to make it work, especially, you know, when you're just starting out. So
Open it up to some questions. Anybody have questions that they'd like to ask?
So Austin, you do a phenomenal job with the Airbnb stuff, and I have been amazed at how easy you make it look. So what do you think you do better than most people when it comes to that stuff?
I've got a pretty strict regimen of really making sure that the back end things, that honestly they're little day-to-day tasks that you wouldn't always think of. I make sure that those are done. The number one thing I always do is make sure cleaning is scheduled and inventory in the house is stocked. And when I say inventory, I mean two different things. I mean the inventory that has to get replenished between stays, things like shampoo and conditioner, toilet paper, paper towels, stuff like that. And then some of the other things that are supposed to be in the house that would typically stay in the house, like an ironing board, a hair dryer. I've got a pretty strict schedule of going around, making sure that all that stuff is in there. I make sure that cleaners are updated every week. Every Monday, the first thing I do, I sit down, I go through 30 listings of cleaning schedules. I make sure everybody's assigned to a date, double confirm. I have, actually, one of you was talking about a roster of handyman and plumbers and stuff. I'm exactly the same way. I have, it used to be by house, now it's by geographical area. Saratoga has a plumber A, a plumber B, an electrician A, electrician B, a handyman A. And if something goes wrong, I know who to call. I've built those lists. I sometimes go into the handyman or like an Ace Hardware or something like that in those areas. I'll ask them, hey, who are the guys that are buying the plumbing equipment the most? Who's the guy that's coming in here buying the electrical equipment the most? I need their numbers. And typically, like in Hunter, for example, that Ace Hardware gave me a ton of people's contacts, happy to refer. So that's how I built those lists. But really just coming up with, you find what works and you just repeat it. And it's a little bit different going from 2 to 5 houses, but 20 to 30, it's the same thing. I'm doing all the same jobs. I'm just doing it 10 times more.
Right, and you also get started with that before the closing a lot of times.
Yeah, I actually, Vincent knows this because I use him for everything. I did have a house at one point where part of the deal was I was buying an Airbnb. It was coming fully furnished. It had already been listed. I was inheriting some bookings that I transferred over to a new listing. You can't change the listing admin owner on Airbnb, so you have to start fresh if you're buying something like that. But what I did in the contract was I actually negotiated that a month after the expected closing date, I was allowed to activate the calendar on Airbnb. And if we had not closed, I would manage those bookings and give the money back to the owner until we closed, which actually ended up happening because of me. And I had to give them one booking of revenue. But the day that I closed on that house, I remember it was December 16th. The day I closed on that house, I had a booking moving in that day. So that's actually a great point. And I've never been asked or even talked about that question before. I've done that a few times, and if you can do that when you're buying an Airbnb, if you're buying it furnished, and honestly, I've done it before too, where I've had 2 units, and one upstairs was furnished, and I listed the downstairs one and just disclosed that it was going to be decorated in a similar way, and that it was going to be active in about a month. And if you didn't like the listing photos once it went active, you could get a full refund for the booking. So if you can get an Airbnb listed prior to closing, and that first day you have things on the calendar, that's very important. It's upfront seed money, yeah.
Question in the back.
Yeah, just curious, how do you keep your subs happy? Besides just sending them a check? Anything else you do? So they'll respond to you?
So honestly, most of them are friends, so close friends that, you know, I've either grown up with, I have a very solid relationship with. One of them standing in the back right there, he's actually my plumber that I use for literally everything. So it's really, what I would say is just developing those relationships with those people, and, you know, just nurturing them really. You know, always giving them business, always, you know, just touching base, even if it's just to grab a cup of coffee or whatever, maybe grab dinner. There's a book out there, I don't know if anyone's read it, but it's called Who Not How, and it's an awesome book, basically just saying for every issue you have in your life, I mean, this isn't just real estate, but everything, there's a person to help you with that issue, right? So definitely recommend it. It's an awesome book. So,
Just by a show of hands, who here works in the trades or construction? Raise your hands. So you could talk to them, and they'll be good connections for you. Other questions? Anybody? All right. Well,
I have a question regarding Airbnbs. Have you been noticing the towns are getting stricter on short-term rentals, and some towns shutting them down altogether?
Without a doubt. Mostly see people in the town that get frustrated with Airbnb, whether they don't like the loud noises next to them at night, or they don't like what it's doing to maybe the market in that town. Some places, I believe Red Hook, just a little north of here, is fully banned Airbnb. I had this conversation actually when I first got here. It was the first thing I talked about, that somebody asked that question. And what I've typically told people to do is just call the town hall and ask to apply for a permit for Airbnb, and they're gonna tell you, here's where to go to do it. You can't do it, or we don't have one. Places like Saratoga really encourage, I wouldn't say they encourage it, but they allow it. They love people coming for weddings. They love people coming for the track. They have a ton of businesses up there. They want people to be there. Some other places, they're a little bit more quiet, a little bit more quaint. People have been there a lot longer. It's less transient. They don't want the influx of all these out-of-towners. So just do your homework. It's important to also see not whether it's banned or not, but maybe get a gauge on where the town's moving, especially right now, to your point, because a lot of places are considering either restricting or banning.
Yeah, town of Poughkeepsie just put restrictions in a couple months ago, actually.
Yep, places where
Amount of acreage, certain amount of square footage per room.
Yep. Yep, you'll see people or places limit how many days a year you can do or a minimum night stay, 2 weeks minimum or 100 days a year, something like that. Typically, it's in areas where the Airbnb market has got popular and it's starting to affect the affordable housing in the area. Hudson's a good example of that too.
Thank you.
Eric, I have a question for you. Sure. I know you said that you partnered with quite a few people. How do you know when you can, what's the level where you can trust someone where you can partner with them? Ever since I've been a kid, my dad's always told me that business is business and a cup of tea is a cup of tea. Meaning, like, it's not always a good idea to get in business with friends because it sours relationships and money and all that stuff. So, like, what's the level of comfort you have to have with someone to be able to be like, okay, you know, I'll take your $50,000, $100,000, I'm sure even more in some instances, where they can trust you and you can trust them to show up?
I'm probably the worst person to ask because I borrowed so much private money, friends' money. I've partnered with people. I've had all positive experiences so far. I think December 28th, I bought a triplex with 75-80% of a friend's money, 30-year fixed loan. We had a lawyer draft it. Once basically we come to terms, I just pass it off. I say, all right, you know, Giselle, take care of this, blah, 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 move on. You know, even business agreements, I know what I'm good at. I suck at paperwork. Sorry, Vinny, anyone that has to deal with me knows I suck at paperwork. So I usually pawn that off onto my business partners. I'm not good at paperwork. I know it. So I say, all right, I know I'm good at looking at something quickly, analyzing what needs to be repaired, what's the cheapest way to do it, the most effective way to do it, how can I make a lot of money? So far, everyone I've done business with, I'm pretty upfront about what I do and what I do well. And I try to find out, can they bring me value? Can I bring them value? It's not just about taking the value. I got to make sure I'm giving something too. And as long as I can bring value and they bring value, we'll have a long-lasting relationship.
What do you mean by value other than just money?
So,
Okay, let's say I got $100,000 to give you. What are you looking for in me other than just money?
so right now, my one business partner, Kevin, he's going to school for his MBA right now in Columbia. He's not local. He finds so many deals. Me and him make a great partnership. I manage them, I fix them, I repair them. We both throw up capital. We have a joint account with lots of money in it, and we buy, we sell, we flip. It all goes in and out. We bring each other value. We balance each other really, really well. Could he find a contractor that do what I do? Definitely. Could I find a VA to do what he does? Definitely. But we still see value in each other. And, you know, if you just had $100,000, to be honest, and you're brand new, what I'd say is, hey, look, lend me that money. I'll do an open door with you. I'm going to buy this house. I just bought one Friday on Carroll Drive in Poughkeepsie. So I'm doing this house. For your $100,000, I'll use it to basically buy this house or to rehab the house. You come as much as you want. You ask me any questions you want. Plus, you're going to get interest. So if you're brand new, that brings someone value. To them, lending the money might not really mean anything to them. To me, money is my biggest thing. I'm constantly, hey, I send out texts to my friends, random people that like I've been friends with 30 years. Hey, by any chance, you got any money in your IRA? You got any money in your Roth? You know, I know you're a teacher. You could take up to $50,000 as a teacher, 5% interest. It's actually 6% interest, but 5 goes back in your bank account. So I tell all my teacher friends, what up? I'll give you 8-9%. 5, it's going back anyway. So you just really made 14% when you think about it. Unfortunately, a lot of teachers are really bad with their money. So that money's going for their pool, that money's going for a new car. But yeah, you know, for me, money is definitely bring value, but money's cheap. You can buy money, hard money lenders, you know, private money lenders. For me, finding deals, that's a huge value.
So we'll wrap up there. Please feel free to find these guys, ask them more questions, pick their brains. That's why they're here. Again, thank you to all three of you guys for coming. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.